Alright, so we're going to be talking about how to find the greatest common factor. This particular example is going to cover how to find the greatest common factor when given numbers first. So we're going to be looking at this problem in two different ways. So the first way that we're going to talk about is creating a factor tree. So a factor tree looks something like this. We start with the number we have. So here we have a 24. Right? And what we want to do is we want to break up 24 into a multiple of two different numbers. It could be anything. So, it could be 2 and 12. It can be 4 and 6. Whatever combination is the first thing that pops into your head. And honestly, for mine, the first thing that popped into my head was a 2 and a 12. Now, what we want to do is take a look at these two factors and think, are any of them prime numbers? Because what we're doing in a factor tree is we are taking our original number here and we're breaking it down to a prime factorization. So taking a look at 2, 2 is a prime number, so I'm going to circle that. But looking at 12, 12 is not a prime number. I can break up 12. So I'm going to break up 12 by doing 3 times 4. And I know that 3 is a prime number, so I'm going to circle that one up. And 4 can be broken up to 2 times a 2. So here I have a factorization of 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. Now we need to do the same thing for 42. So the first thing that pops into my head when I think of 42 is a 2 and a 21. 2 is a prime number, so I can circle that. 21 is not. I can break 21 up to 3 times 7. And those are both prime numbers. So here my prime factorization is 2 times 3 times 7. Now, what I want to do at this point is I want to compare my factorizations. And I want to essentially play the matching game. What do I have in common? So I can see here that I have a 2 in common. So I'm going to include that 2 here. And what I'm doing is I'm creating a list or a multiplication of everything I have in common because that's going to be our greatest common factor. So taking a look here, so the next number is a 2. I don't have a 2 over here to match up, so I'll cross that one out. I don't have a 2, so I can cross that second one out. But here I do have a 3 in common, so I can bring that 3 on over. And I've run out of numbers. Right, over here I have this 7, but that doesn't match up with anything over here. So 2 and a 3 were the only factors I had in common. And when I multiply 2 times 3 together, I get a 6. That means that 6 is our greatest common factor. 6 is the biggest number that goes into 24 and that also goes into 42. So then let's talk about an example where we have some variables attached to our numbers. So when we're looking at an example like this where we have to find the greatest common factor of 14m to the 5th and 56m to the 8th. So first off, taking a look at just the terminology, greatest common factor. So greatest, right, we're talking about the biggest in common, so it does have to have it in common with both of our terms, or however many terms that we have for that particular problem. And factor is something that can be multiplied to something else. So we're trying to find the biggest multiple, or the biggest number, the biggest variables that we can multiply that are within these examples. So taking a look at our numbers 14 and 56. Now we could do factor trees for both of these numbers, but I want to talk to you about a different way to look at it. If I have to have a factor in common with 14 and 56. I know that my greatest common factor cannot be bigger than 14. Because if it's bigger than 14, then, like for example, 18. Well, the number 18 is not in 14, so it's not in common. I can't use it. So it might be easier here, maybe a little bit quicker, for me to just list the different factors of 14, which are 1, 2, and a 7. And take a look at these and see which one of these will go into the 56. Now, I would start with the biggest. We do want the greatest common factor, so I would start with the biggest number and move your way on down. But it just so happens that 14 actually does go into 56, so we can use 14 for our greatest common factor for our numbers. 14 goes into 14, 14 goes into 56. So what we need to know about variables is this. First off, we need to check to make sure that each one of our terms does have that variable. So make sure that here we're looking at the letter M, so I have a letter M here, I have a letter M here. So it is in common with both of them. We just need to figure out how many M's do we have in common. And that comes from right over here. And this says that we choose the lowest power of each variable. So here we're just talking about M's. And if we're looking at the lowest power, well, over here I have a 5. Over here on this side I have an 8. So 5 is definitely lower than an 8, so I'm going to take 5. So here my greatest common factor is 14m to the 5th. So the biggest number shared by the numbers and the lowest exponent shared by my letters. So let's take a look at one last example here. So here we have 64a to the 7th, b to the 9th, and 40a squared, b to the 5th, and we're trying to find the greatest common factor. So let's compare our numbers first, 64 and 40. So then what I would recommend is let's go ahead and just list all the factors of 40. So 1 times 40, 2 times 20, 4 times 10, 5 times 8. And what we're looking for is which one, or what is the greatest factor out of all of these that would go into 64? Well, 40 doesn't go into 64, 20 doesn't go into 64, 10 doesn't go into 64, but 8 does. So I can say that my greatest common factor as far as my numbers are concerned is an 8. So then let's take a look at our variables. So I see A's and B's here, right? So, and I do have an A in each term, I do have a B in each term. So what we need to do is we need to figure out how many A's, how many B's. And remember, we want the lowest power of each. So taking a look at A, so I have 7 over here and I have 2 over there. So if I want the lowest power, I'm definitely taking the 2. And then if I'm looking at the B's here, well, I have 9 and then I have 5. So 5 is lower, so I will be taking that 5. So my greatest common factor here is 8a squared, b to the 5th.